In this video, I'm going to show you how to set up the Facebook Conversions API or Meta Ads Conversions API through server-side Google Tag Manager. By the end of the video, you'll know how the Conversions API works and you'll know all the steps required to set up the Facebook Conversions API yourself. Let's dive in. Hey and welcome to the channel. My name is Leon. This channel exists to help you make better decisions in your daily work using your web stats. So before we head over to the tutorial, I want to bring your attention to a service called Stape. Stape is the easiest way to get started with server-side tracking. And if you use my affiliate link in the video description, not only do you support the channel at no extra cost to you, you also get my free mini course on server-side tracking with Stape. So go ahead into the video description if you're interested in that. Also, I have created a short cheat sheet on how you can grow your website traffic. So if you're interested in growing your website traffic, there's a free download link in the video description as well. All right, with that out of the way, let me show you what we're about to set up. I'm going to explain every step, but I want to show you what the result of this tutorial will be. So I'm here in the Meta Ads Event Manager. And as you can see, I have my website open right here, but we're tracking a page view event and we're tracking that twice. So there's an event tracked through the browser and there is an event tracked through the server. And this is the Conversions API event. And as you can see, it's a single event that is tracked twice. And this is how Meta Ads operates. This is called a redundant setup. So we're both tracking the Conversions API through our server-side Google Tag Manager container, but we're still using also the old method with the Facebook pixel in our regular Google Tag Manager container. We're sending the same event twice, and to make sure that we're not double counting every event, we're using deduplication. So you can see that Meta Ads recognizes that this is the same event, and we're doing that because we're sending the same event ID, so here and here, with the event. So as you can see, if I'm looking up that event ID through my find function in the browser, we can see that this is the same event ID on both events. If I use my contact form, so this is a conversion on my site, let's see what happens. So it's tracking a contact event from the browser with this event ID, and let's wait for a while. The server event is often a little bit later. So yeah, here it is. So we have a contact event from the browser that has this event ID, and we have the same contact event from our server. And if I press Command F, Control F on Windows and look for that event ID, we see that both events have the same event ID. So we're sending the event twice and we're deduplicating it in Meta Ads. So again, this is a redundant setup. This is how Meta Ads recommends that you set up your Conversions API. And in this tutorial, I'm going to show you all the steps that are required to set this up in server-side Google Tag Manager. All right, before we get started on how to set up the Facebook Conversions API with Google Tag Manager, let's cover what we did in the previous tutorials, because I've already made a couple of videos on how to set up server-side Google Tag Manager, how to set up Google Analytics and consent mode in a server-side Google Tag Manager setup. And this video is building upon that. So don't panic if you haven't watched those first. But what we did in the previous tutorials is we set up a regular GTM container here, a server-side Google Tag Manager container. We installed Google Analytics in both containers, and we set up consent mode. So again, don't panic if you haven't watched those, but it's probably a good idea to either watch those later or watch those first, because this video really builds upon that. Also, if you want to set up the Facebook Conversions API, there are two things that you need. And for that, we're going into the Events Manager. And I'm going to deep link the Events Manager in the video description. So there's a link that you can click that leads you to the Event Manager in case you're not quite familiar with the Facebook business account. But we're here under Events Manager and then under Data Sources. And we're going to need two things. First of all, we need the Facebook Pixel ID. You can find it here under Dataset ID. I'm just going to copy it to clipboard and I'm going to paste it in here in a text file because we're going to need that later. I'm going to call this Meta Ads Pixel ID. The second thing that we need is a token. And again, we're here and in the Event Manager under Data Sources, under Settings. And if you just scroll down, there's a section called Conversions API. And here is a button that's called Generate Access Token. If you press that, it will generate an access token. And again, I'm going to copy that into my text file here, Meta Ads Token. In some cases, this button is grayed out, so you're not able to click that. Just contact whoever is administrating that account, because he or she should be able to press that for you and just send you that token in an email or whatever. Alright, let me show you how you can set up consent mode with server-side Google Tag Manager. And we already discussed that we're going to build a redundant setup, so we're both going to track our events through the regular Facebook pixel on the regular Google Tag Manager container, but we're also going to track the same events through our server container and the Conversions API. And afterwards, we're going to deduplicate these events to make sure we're not double tracking. So 3 steps, and here's the first step. We're going to set up our Facebook pixel in our regular container. And chances are that you've already done that, but I recommend that you still watch this video because the details really matter at this point. So I recommend that you watch this part even though you have set this up yourself to make sure that we're on the same page. So you can set up meta ads or the Facebook pixel by going into tags and making a new tag here. I'm going to call this 0202 meta ads page view. And under the tag configuration, I'm going to go into the community template gallery and I'm going to look for Facebook. And then I like to use the Facebook pixel template by Facebook archive. So I'm going to add this to my workspace. And the first question that we get here is the Facebook pixel ID, the first text field. And we could just paste in our pixel ID from our notes here. But what I like to do is I like to make a variable. Let me show you what I mean. So under variables, I'm going to make a new variable that I'm going to call meta ads pixel ID. And I'm going to make this a constant variable and I'm going to paste in the meta ads pixel right here. And every time I reference this variable, it's just going to return this value to me. So let me save it. So for instance here in our page view tag, referencing this variable, it's just going to return the pixel ID for me. And we're going to need this value a couple of times in the future. And this is just a nice way to save us some work. So under event name, I'm going to give this just the regular page view tag. And as a trigger, for now, I'm going to use the initialization all pages trigger. We're going to change this afterwards, but we're going to take this step by step. And in the tag configuration, there's one more thing that I want to change here right now. Under advanced settings and then consent settings, we're going to say require additional consent for tag to fire. And we're going to require ad storage. This makes sure that this tag is only loaded when a user has given permission for marketing. Later on, we're going to return to this tag to make sure deduplication is done through the event ID. But for now, let's leave it here. Let's hit save. So I'm going to go into preview. I'm going to connect. And as you can see, I have my website open here with a cookie banner. So I haven't given consent yet. And I like to test this scenario to make sure that I'm not tracking data before I have consent. In the tag assistant, under summary, I can see that the meta ads page view tag has not fired yet. And if I go into initialization here, that's the trigger that I'm currently using for this page view tag, it says that the tag is blocked by consent settings. Well, let's see what happens if I allow cookies. So I'm going to click allow all. And now in tag assistant, under summary, what's happening? So here I still see my meta ads page view tag that it's not fired. And that is because I'm still on the first page load. And what you will find is that if I go into a next page, that on the second page, that meta ads is loaded. And that is because it's currently set to the initialization all pages trigger. So on the second page, in this stage, meta ads is loaded because the consent is granted. But on the first page load, on initialization, meta ads is not loaded because consent was denied at that stage. So if you need a little bit more context and explanation on how consent works, please watch the consent mode video with server-side Google Tag Manager. There's a link in the video description to an entire explanation on this topic. It's quite complex, but for now I want to state that it's better to change the meta ads page view tag to a different trigger. So I'm gonna, instead of using the initialization all pages trigger, I'm gonna change the trigger to cookie consent update. And let's hit save. So let's go into my site. I'm gonna go into inspect application cookies to delete my cookie preferences. Again, watch the other video if you need a little bit more context. But if I hit preview now, so I'm gonna refresh my settings. I have deleted my preferences here. So again, here's the scenario where I haven't given consent yet. So again, under summary, meta ads is not fired. But if I hit allow all cookies, and I'm still on the first page here, I see that the meta ads page view tag is loaded. And that is because I changed the trigger from initialization all pages to the cookie consent update date layer event. And this ensures that we're tracking on the first page load. All right, now that we have our client side setup ready, let's go into our server side container and let's also make the same events here and send them to the Conversions API. So to send data to the Conversions API, we're going to make a new tag. I'm going to call this 0201 meta ads page view. And under the tag configuration, I'm going to go into the community template gallery and I'm going to look for Facebook. And here is the template that I like to use. So the Facebook Conversions API template by state.io. So let's add this to our workspace. And here under event name setup method, you could inherit from client, and that is fine as long as you use regular default events, but it's best to have a little bit more control. So I'm going to use override. I'm going to set the page view event. I'm going to choose it here. So we can leave the action source to website, and under API access token, I'm going to make a new variable for this, like we did in our client side setup. I'm going to call this meta ads token, and I'm going to make a constant variable where I'm going to paste in the token from my nodes, and I'm going to hit save. And the Facebook pixel ID, we already made a variable for this in our regular container, but since this is a separate container, we need to make this variable again. So we're going to do this one more time. Under Facebook pixel ID, I'm going to make a new variable. I'm going to call this meta ads pixel ID. I'm going to paste in, I'm going to make this a constant variable and paste in the value here. I'm going to hit save. So under triggers, I'm going to build a trigger that makes this event fire on every page as long as there is consent. We need to make a new trigger for this, all pages with consent. Under trigger configuration, I'm going to choose page view and I'm going to say some page views and I'm going to say consent mode. This variable, we made this in an earlier tutorial on consent mode with server-side Google Tag Manager container. So if you want to know how to set this up and you haven't watched that video, I really recommend that you watch that first, do those steps and come back to this trigger, because it's really important that you don't send information to Facebook if there is no consent given. Let's hit save and let's hit save. Let's do the same thing for our contact event. So I'm gonna make a new tag here, 0202 meta ads contact. In the tag configuration, I'm going to reuse the Facebook Conversions API template. Again, I'm going to override the event name and I'm going to pick the contact event. And under API access token, I'm going to reference my variable meta ads token. And under pixel ID, I'm going to reference my pixel ID variable here. So as a trigger, I'm going to build a trigger for my contact form submit. So how can I do this? Well, let me show you. I'm going to hit save. I'm going to save the tag and I'm going to show you by hitting preview mode here. And of course, I also have my client-side preview mode on, so I have Tag Assistant enabled here. Let me just fill out my contact form here. So I'm going to hit test, test, test. I'm going to hit send. So this will forward me to a thank you page. I'm currently tracking a contact form submit event that I should get here. Oh, oops, it wasn't loaded. So let's just refresh my thank you page. Yeah, there you go. So I have an incoming contact form submit event in my server-side Google Tag Manager container. And this is the event that I'm gonna build a trigger upon. So let me show you how this works. So let's go back into my Google Tag Manager server-side container. I'm gonna open up my contact event. I'm gonna build a trigger for this event. So under triggering, I'm gonna make a contact event with consent. Under trigger configuration, let's make a custom event. I'm going to call this contact form submit. This event name needs to exactly match the event name that you see here. And let me, for clarity, set it into the title of the trigger. We need to add a rule to make it consent only. And again, I'm going to reference a variable that I built in an earlier tutorial. Consent mode add storage contains granted. And I'm going to hit save. So please watch that tutorial again if you don't know how to set this up, because again, it's really important to only send data into meta ads as long as there is consent given. So let's hit save and let's hit save. All right, let's test our setup, and we can test our setup by going into Events Manager. And again, we're under Events Manager, Data Sources, and then there is a button here that says Test Events. And you can check if your Conversions API is set up correctly. And if you open up this tab right here, there's a test event code that we can use. And every time we use this test event code, the event is not counted in the real database, but it's counted as a test event and it will show up in this test screen. And we can do that by going into our tags here. So I have a page view tag and there's a test ID field and I can just paste it in here. The downside of using this test ID is that I cannot count the amount of times that I forgot to remove the test ID, and I just hit publish. And when you do that, the test ID ends up in the production version of your tracking setup, and that means that every time a user hits a conversion or watches a page, it's not counted for real, but it comes in this test screen. And because I messed this up so many times and we missed a lot of data because of that, maybe I'm just stupid, but I have a trick for this. Let me show you how this works. I'm going to make a variable. I'm going to call this the meta ads test ID. And I'm not going to make this a constant like I did with the other variables, but I'm going to make this a lookup table. And as an input variable, I'm going to choose, and we need to look for it under built-in variables. I'm going to choose the debug mode, and as a default value, the default value is empty. So by default, there is no test ID. So I can hit publish and there is no test ID, but in one case there is a test ID, and I'm going to paste it under output, and that's when debug mode is set to true. So every time I'm in preview mode, so that means that this window here is open, that will set this value to true. Then I'm going to use a test ID, but in all other cases, so when a regular visitor visits my site, I'm going to leave the value empty. And this is a great way. You do not have to remind yourself to remove the value. You're a lot less likely to mess up your tracking setup, and you are able to test your setup. By the way, if you set the test ID today and you want to test tomorrow, chances are that the test ID has changed. So sometimes you need to go back into the variable and just manually change this value to something else if the test ID has changed. But for now, let me just save this, and the test ID variable is set to my page view tag. I'm also going to add this to my contact tag here. So under test ID, I'm going to set the meta ads test ID variable here. Let me hit save. And let's preview this container. And on my site, I'm just going to open up my home page and let's see what happens. So here I'm tracking a page view on the front end of my site. So meta ads page view is triggered here. So in the server container here, in the preview mode of that container, I see a page view coming in, and I also see that the meta ads page view tag has loaded and it's succeeded. And this is really an important check. Sometimes if you mess up the meta ads token, this will say that it didn't succeed or it failed. Then you need to go back to your setup check if you filled out all the details correctly. The final check that I want to do is in the events manager. And here we see that we just measured 2 page view events, one from the browser and one from the server. We can do the same for the other event as well. So under contact, if I fill out my form one more time, hit send. So I just tracked a meta ads contact event. And if I go into the server container in the preview mode, there's a contact form submit event here as well. And I see that meta ads contact is also succeeded. So in the events manager, let's check if our contact event has been registered. So yeah, here it is. So I have a contact event from the server and I have a contact event from the browser. So this is how I can verify that my events are coming in correctly. So there's one more step before this setup is finished, and that is we need to deduplicate these events, because as you can see, one contact form is now tracked twice and one page view is now tracked twice. One via the regular pixel on the front end of our site and one through the Conversions API. And although this is what we want, we need to make sure that these events are deduplicated to make sure that we're not double counting every event on our site. And we're doing that through an event ID. Let me show you how this works. So we're going to go back into our client-side container and we're going to go into variables. And under variables, we're going to make a new variable. I'm going to call this event ID. I'm going to open the community template gallery here and I'm going to look for event ID. And The one that I use all the time is this one by M. Barsch. It's a German guy, Marcus Barsch, I believe his name is. A brilliant guy. I really recommend that you follow him on LinkedIn. And if you know a little bit German, you can look him up on YouTube as well. But I like this one. I believe the Stape.io is also very good. But this is the one that I have used all the time. I'm going to add this to my workspace. So add it here. And I believe that there's a little bug that prevents me from... Yeah, there you go. So I need to close this one. And let's make it a new variable event ID. And right now, yeah, here is my custom template that I just imported here. And let's reference it here. There are no settings that I need to do. So we can just save this variable. And I'm going to go back into tags. Because I want to set this event ID to my client-side setup here, my Facebook pixel. And I want to set this event ID on the server side. So let's go into my client side first. Let's go into the meta ads tag here. And let's open up the more settings tab. So I'm in the meta ads page view tag here. Let's set event ID to, yeah, here it is, event ID. This is the variable that we just created. So I'm going to send the event ID with every page view tag. I'm going to do the same with the contact tag. So let's open this one. Let's hit more settings. And let's fill out the event ID here as well. So I'm going to hit save. So now that we have added the event ID to our client-side Facebook pixel tags, we also want to send the same event ID with our server-side meta ad tags. And the way we do that is by sending the same event ID with our Google Analytics 4 events, because these are the events that will ultimately trigger the meta ads events here. So we can do that by going into our page view tag here and going into the tag under event parameters and add an event parameter with the name event ID. And as a value, I'm going to select the event ID value right here and I'm going to hit save. I'm going to do the same thing for my contact form submit. So under event parameters, I'm going to make an event ID. I'm going to hit save. So let's hit preview and let's see what happens. One meta ads page view event was tracked right here. And here is a new page view tag, meta ads. Let's open up the events manager. Can you see what happens here? So there is a new page view that is tracked in my testing suite. One from the browser, one from the server. But as you can see, the server event was deduplicated because we are sending the event ID. How did this work? Well, the browser event has the event ID from that I set on the tag. So here is a field with event ID. Where is it? Yeah, more settings here, event ID. So I'm sending the event ID here. I'm also sending the event ID through the page view tag. And because I'm using the event parameter event ID, we will probably be able to see that here. So I have a page view tag here with event data, event ID. And because I'm using this key, my meta ads tag is so smart that it recognizes that I'm sending an event ID and it's just forwarding this to meta ads. So let's see what the outgoing request looks like. If we look for event ID, oh, here it is, event ID. It's sending the same event ID automatically. It forwards that with the event to meta ads. And that is why we're currently deduplicating every event. And you can recognize sometimes this doesn't work. So the real test is just to copy this event ID and just hit Command F or look in your browser and then look for that event ID. And as you can see here, this event and this event has the same event ID. That is what you want to see here. Alright, so this is how you set up the Facebook Conversions API with Google Tag Manager server side. I hope this video was clear. I hope it was helpful. If you liked this video, please consider liking these videos, subscribing to the channel. That really helps me out, get these videos out to as many people as I can. Also, if you have questions or you want to recommend a video ID, please leave a comment. I always love hearing from you guys. I want to thank you for watching this video and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.